Do you stand by your position on forced treatment, and what is your reason for it?
Let me explain the business with Hawley Road. I'm a lawyer. Clients come to me for advice. I fight their case. It's not necessarily my case. That's what I do for a living. Tough love? Well, I'm an advocate for treatment of addicts and people who have mental health issues. I want treatment for people. I want them to be saved from their dilemma. Now, right now, there's no involuntary basis for this, and the province will have control over what can be done. The city should advocate for treatment facilities to deal with drug addiction, mental health issues, and I'm in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Adam Hyatt, you'll take the last question for the first mayor candidate round. Adam Hyatt is number 1 on your list, folks. Adam, I'm going to quote your website where you said that about the unhoused population, this is a quote, "I vow to make their lives as uncomfortable as legally possible." You have since then changed the wording on your website. However, you still say that you would like to make their lives uncomfortable. As mayor, in what way do you intend to make these people's lives more uncomfortable than they are, and what purpose do you believe that would serve?
Well, I think you're right. That was on my website, slightly perhaps a strong wording that was changed, but the principle remains. You know, we have a balance. We have people that need help in housing. We also have a city and a downtown that needs the right to operate their businesses and thrive. So only, and it is a bit of a tough love approach, but only after, if you include the entire section of the website, after there's a world-class mental health and rehab facility available, after there's barrier-free housing available, then I do believe we have to show some tough love, because like I don't believe forcefully moving people who have nowhere else to go, like the city's tried in the past, I also don't believe when quality options are available, the status quo is acceptable either. So there's a balance there, and what I mean by that is perhaps shooing people along as if they're trying to do drugs at downtown businesses and stuff like that, so that they hopefully make their own decision that, you know what, this isn't worth it, and I'm going to accept some help that's being offered to me. So that's how I'd answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And thanks to all the mayors. And I'll just ask everybody to refrain from commenting. You know what, write down your comments and your thoughts on your card there and take that to the polls, however you feel about the responses that you hear tonight. So that was the first mayor's round. And we're now going to open up the round to questions for all candidates, which includes mayoral candidates and council candidates. So the next question is for the previous council members who were present for the Safe Streets bylaw and voted in favor. Terry, I know you already began to answer this question. I'll be asking you first, and then it'll be Kyle Sampson, Susan Scott, and Brian Skaken in that order. So Terry is number 2 on your cards, everyone. Terry McConaughey. Terry, you voted in favor of the Safe Streets bylaw, despite BCAFN Regional Chief Terry Teegee calling it inherently racist and sitting before you to ask that you not support the bylaw. Do you stand by that decision, and why or why not?
As I had already started to say, that when the Safe Streets bylaw came before us, it was the least worst option, and I did support it. I have had the opportunity to learn more about what it is going to take to ensure that folks are getting the help that they need, beginning with housing first, and also that our entire city has the opportunity for clean streets, safe streets, and an opportunity for us to all share spaces where we all feel safe. And that is very important. And when I say that, as your mayor, I deeply feel the responsibility for the safety, the ability to thrive for my entire city. And that includes regardless of socioeconomic levels. As your mayor, one of the first things I would do if elected would be to revisit and come up with a much better strategy than the Safe Streets bylaw currently offers.
Thank you, Terry. Kyle Sampson, you're up next. Kyle Sampson is number 19 on your And do you need me to repeat the question, Kyle? Okay.
Thank you.
You voted in favor of the Safe Streets bylaw, despite BCAFN Regional Chief Terry TG calling it inherently racist and sitting before you to ask that you not support the bylaw. Do you stand by that decision, and why or why not?
I did vote in favor of it, and at the time, similar, I felt like it was an option that was best available to the city of Prince George. At this point, what I would say is, although I stand behind the decision we made because it's been made, I stand behind revisiting that decision and making sure that it is the best decision or the best path forward for the city. If it's having negative impacts on residents of any sort, whether they're housed or unhoused, then that's obviously not the solution that we want as a city. We want to have solutions that are working to make life better for everybody. So when I look at making decisions on council, it's trying to find the best solution that's going to be for everybody, not for any one group of our population. So I would certainly be in favor of revisiting this and making sure that, and doing a bigger, deeper dive, perhaps more consultation to see what impacts is it having, negative, potentially if positive, and if it's not working, how do we do better?
Thank
Thanks.
you, Kyle. Susan Scott, you're up next. And Susan, Scott is number 20 on your papers, everyone. And Susan, do you need me to repeat the question, or are you good?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yes, I voted for the Safe Streets bylaw, and at its essence, I continue to support it. I do believe that homelessness is not a crime. Mental health is not a crime. This bylaw is to address individuals who conduct themselves violently, aggressively, or otherwise inappropriately. Yes, I have some notes. Those who take these counterproductive approaches will face consequences for those choices, and this is one of them. Keeping society safe for everyone is not an option. It's a requirement, and one that we will meet. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And you can just pass that right over to Brian Skaken. And you have the question, Brian, or you need me to repeat it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Brian, you voted in favor of the Safe Streets bylaw, despite BCAFN Regional Chief Terry TG calling it inherently racist and sitting before you to ask that you not support the bylaw. Do you stand by that decision, and why or why not?
Well, the decision at the time was made in consultation with the entire community. Things like, I think Councillor Scott touched on it, daycares, bank machines, malls. There's a list of places that the Safe Street bylaw covers, and that's the entire community. And that was the thrust and the reason I supported it at the time. I have no problem revisiting it, but the community safety, we had residents in certain areas of town that were basically under siege. We talked to our administration, we talked to the RCMP, we got feedback from different community organizations, and respectfully, not just Chief TG, we had a lot of consultation. So when we made the decision, it wasn't an easy one. So I stand by my decision, but I have no problem revisiting it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I forgot to mention your number. Brian Skaken is number 22 on your papers there. This next question goes to Corey Ramsey. Corey Ramsey is number 17 on your forms. Corey, you were one of 2 councillors who voted against the Safe Streets bylaw. Do you stand by your decision, and why or why not?
I continue to stand by my decision to oppose the Safe Streets bylaw. I carry a different position than my colleagues. I know everyone has the best interest and is voting in what they believe is the best course for our community, but I just didn't believe that policing homelessness in that way was productive. To this date, there still has not been a single ticket issued under the Safe Streets bylaw, and yet we're still talking about these contentious issues. We need to be destigmatizing homelessness and poverty. So that's my position on the matter.
Thank you, Corey. I have a question here for Noor Salim, but I don't think Noor has... Is Noor here? Or am I missing him? No, he hasn't shown up, right? Okay. So the next question is for James Steidel. James is number 23 on your cards. James, you've campaigned on amending the official community plan to protect green spaces like Ginter's Green. What other amendments will you propose and support to contribute specifically to the safety and well-being of unhoused people and those accessing the illicit drug supply?
In the official community plan?
Yeah.
Good question. I mean, the official community plan has a lot to do with urban growth. So, I mean, I think we gotta prioritize getting growth happening downtown. You know, as we expand ever outwards with the city, I think that kind of takes a lot of economic activity away from downtown, takes a lot of, you know, life from downtown. I think we gotta make downtown an attractive place to live, to carry out businesses. And I think the official community plan's gotta recognize that. And these are huge problems. I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think we really have to look at a regional perspective here and talk about why we're not getting help from the province and surrounding communities. A lot of people come to Prince George to get services, and we're not getting help from surrounding communities to provide those services. This could be resolved through property taxation or provincial help, so thanks.
Thank you, James. The next question is for Wes Mitchell. Wesley Mitchell is number 14 on your cards. Wes, you've advocated for the need for drug users to go away and get better and to clean the streets for businesses to flourish in a previous forum. What is your plan to improve the quality of life for people living in poverty, people who are unhoused and those accessing the illicit drug supply? And how are they included in your future vision of Prince George's downtown?
Being a recovered addict in recovery, part of the updated official community plan, and part of it right now, is to continue the connective building of phase 2 and 3, which I really like what's going on with that, but we got to continue to develop. Within these places, people that are coming out of jail go to the halfway houses, such as activators that go to connectivity. They have all these starting points to where we need a facility built on the outskirts of our jurisdiction. You know, for example, the youth encampment right now that's up by Murdoch Veterinarian Clinic. It's Crown land. We're going to need to ask for provincial and federal funding for this to be turned in for our single women and our youth. And we need to help our single women and our youth, and they need facilities where they choose to go. Whether they come from on the streets, whether they come from in jail, whether they come from a halfway house, whether they come from the nations. That's my plan, is to continue building houses and choices, all my relations.
Thank you, Wes. All right, the next question is a group question. So I'm going to call on you each in this order. It'll be Trudy Clausen, Colleen Mahoney, Karen Meir, Paul Syrup, and Chris Stern. Trudy, you're up first. Trudy's number 11 on your cards, everyone. Trudy, what do you see as the role and relationship of police in the path forward for people accessing the illicit drug supply and unhoused people?
Oh. The role of police, I would think, would be dealing primarily with the suppliers, not the people on the street level, because I agree that is a mental health and addictions issue. It's I would prefer that our police deal primarily with the suppliers, especially as regards the illicit drug supply, and especially in regards to contaminating it, because nobody chooses this lifestyle, and we want people to be able to survive so that they can eventually find a way to live and to thrive. And with that, I would also include we've had so many years where we've had less and less housing, and people need to be able to survive in a home, and we've lost housing supply, and we're just going backwards. And so I really think that we need to work hard to increase our housing supply so that more people can find homes.
Thank you, Trudy. Colleen Mahoney, you're up next. Colleen Mahoney is number 12 on your forms.
Could
Do
you
you need
just
me to
please
repeat? Yeah.
Yes, just because there's a few little different dips
Yes,
in
for
there.
sure. Colleen, what do you see as the role and relationship of police in the path forward for people accessing the illicit drug supply and unhoused people?
That's a tricky question, because I think many different people end up unhoused for many different reasons, and it isn't just because of drugs. I think that the police, because of the history of colonialism and the history that a lot of the police have with people, even in the downtown, they're not necessarily a place of safety. So I think I agree with Trudy in terms of the supply needs to become safer. We need to be looking after and make sure that we're not poisoning people. But I think that the police might be the wrong tool for the job for the most part. I think that having people have someone else in the community, making connections within our community is a better solution. The role of police, I think, is to enforce the laws and to look after all people, not just some. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Karen Meir. About as far apart as you can be. Sorry, Jen. Do you need me to repeat the question, Karen?
No, that's okay.
Okay, and I'll just let everybody know, Karen is number 15 on your cards.
So kind of like the previous two answers, I don't think that the police have a very large role to play with, in the relationship with either drug users or the unhoused population. I fundamentally don't believe you can police your way out of poverty or addiction or any of those challenges. I would like to think, kind of as Colleen noted, that the police could be potentially a supportive role or enforce safety in very specific situations. However, understanding that there is a lot of trauma and history there with the police, and they, kind of like Colleen noted, aren't often seen as a source of safety. So I suppose that would be a key area to work on, is building that relationship to be one of support and safety.
Thank you, Karen. Paul Syrup in the middle there. Paul Syrup is number 21. Sorry to reduce you all to numbers, but
Could you
easier to keep track. Yeah, I'll repeat the question. Paul, what do you see as the role and relationship of police in the path forward for people accessing the illicit drug supply and for unhoused people?
Well, I agree with Trudy that they would very much have a role. I'm not sure that anyone has convinced me that drugs in and of themselves are really a good thing for our society. We use them for pain, but I don't think that's a part of a productive person's, a fruitful, thriving person's lifestyle. So, but the police are going to carry out their marching orders. Again, as Trudy said, trying to reduce the amount of illicit drugs available. And other than that, I don't see a massive role for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I had Chris Stern next, but I'm just making sure, Chris, you're not in the audience or something, going incognito until it's your call? No, doesn't seem like it. Okay, cool. We're going to skip Chris then. Chris Stern, he's not here, right? Okay. All right, the next question is for Tim Bennett. Tim Bennett is number 7 on your cards, everyone. Tim, you were school board trustee and former chair of the Prince George School Board when 2 trustees resigned because of anti-Indigenous racism and a culture of fear on the school district. What will your role be in contributing to an inclusive environment on council, and what specific actions will you take to work towards reconciliation?
Thank you very much, and I think that's an incredibly important question, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Mr. Derek or Ms. Vala Mohammed, although I have had an opportunity to speak with both since that time. You know, I think at that point it was an incredibly horrible time for our district, and I think as a trustee have done a lot of work in that time to be able to start to try to repair relationships with the nations. I had an opportunity in 2 different circles to meet with elders, to meet with representatives of both McLeod Lake and Lheidli T'enneh, to apologize for the role that I played as a trustee in a very colonial system. Since that time, we have also had an opportunity through the Indigenous Education Leadership Table to make real progress. And, you know, when at the end of the day, For me, I'm on my own cultural and learning journey and commit to do better tomorrow than I did today. And I hope that my actions over the last year and a half have really proven that commitment.
Thank you, Tim. Wow, Jen, I couldn't have made the order worse than it is. Cameron Stoltz, you're up next. Literally other end of the table. This was not on purpose, I promise. So Cameron is number 25 on your list, everybody. Cameron, you've campaigned on the idea of a treatment facility for women and youth that would be located near the BC Regional Correctional Centre on Highway 16. Carrier County Family Services spoke last week at a housing symposium in Prince George and said one of the issues Indigenous youth face is disconnection from community and culture. How does your approach to addressing the drug crisis consider the needs of Indigenous youth specifically?
So let's talk about location first. The location I'm actually talking about is the youth containment facility, which is just up from the regional correctional facility. It's surrounded by about 300 acres of open forest. It has a lot of potential to be able to do some of the things that's been discussed with regards to First Nations treatment facilities, and I'm forgetting the location. It's being discussed and built at a lake nearby. I've just blanked. Sorry. Anyway, so my point is that there's an opportunity for us to have something that's close by that's not going to run into the challenge that Haldy Road ran into. I was a supporter of Haldy Road Women's Treatment Facility back in the day. I remain a strong proponent for treatment in our community where people can have access to their family and connection to their family. I think that's a significant piece when we're looking at treatment. And if we build it local, it allows them to stay local and stay in touch with family members. And that's important for First Nations or for anybody else in our community.
Thank you, Cameron. Lisa Mitchell, you're up next. And reminding you all, Lisa Mitchell is number 15 on your cards. Lisa, you have proposed the idea of a dry camp outside of town. Do you propose this camp replaces moccasin flat? Which number? Lisa Mitchell is number 3. I apologize, not number 15. I have no idea how I went from 3 to 15. Let me re-say that question. You've proposed the idea of a dry camp outside of town. Do you propose this camp replaces moccasin flats? And who would be in charge of restricting the flow of drugs and alcohol into the camp?
Well, I think that would I don't believe it could replace moccasin flats because there's other issues besides just addiction in there. And I think if you're going to have a dry camp, that's what you would be, your goal would be towards. With regards to, counseling, I believe in, other types of holistic healing, whether it be nature, animal. Sometimes people just need that connection to start their healing process, because I think that's what it's going to take. As for the dry camp, there would also have to be, medical there as well for, if there was, for the addictions, because we're not going to actually make them go cold turkey for their addiction. They just won't be getting the drugs that they would have been taking. They'll be weaned off them. That's what I meant by a dry camp.
Thank you, Lisa. The next question is for Adam Hyatt first, and then Roy Stewart. And I believe you're sitting close to each other, so that's great. Adam Hyatt is number 1 on your cards, and Roy Stewart's number 4. So this is for both of you. Adam first. You've campaigned on increasing policing as a solution to homelessness and illicit drug use downtown Prince George. The city has budgeted more than $30 million for police this year, a large contrast to funding, to the amount spent on improving quality of life for downtown residents. How will your plan benefit the unhoused population and those accessing drugs, and how will it contribute to their quality of life?
Yeah, so I again, perhaps slightly out of context. So there's a 4-point plan. The first plan is to offer a world-class rehabilitation center for drug addiction and mental health should people choose to go there. The second part of that plan is to aggressively pursue barrier-free housing to give people an option for housing. And thirdly, yes, an increased presence in police downtown to prevent some of the violent crimes or property crimes that are happening to anyone down there, including the downtown business. I'm not talking about increasing the police budget, I'm talking about reprioritizing the police budget. So I think we pay enough in protective services, over $54 million a year. But I think if we reprioritize those services, we could get much better results. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Roy, do you need me to repeat the question? Oh, you'll need a microphone first, hey?
In my platform, I talk about a program similar to Adam's. Police is part of it, policing, increased policing, because crime should not be rampant, unchecked. It should be dealt with. If people are lighting fires that ignite buildings, arson. If people are assaulting other people, crimes, that should be stopped, reduced, so that the people who come downtown feel safe and the businesses can work properly. I am, as a lawyer, I'm fully in favor of decriminalizing small amounts of drugs for people. That's fine. As a lawyer and as a member of my profession, we are involved in implementing the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights in this province. So we have a broad spectrum of ways to deal with controlling and rehabilitating people who are drug addicted or mentally problems. So policing is an important component. We have to make the downtown safe. We have to make the city safe. That's where I'm going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ron Polillo, you're up next. Ron is number 16 on your cards, everyone. Ron, this question might sound familiar. You were a school board trustee as well when 2 trustees resigned because of anti-Indigenous racism and a culture of fear in the school district. What will your role be in contributing to an inclusive environment on council, and what specific actions will you take to work towards reconciliation?
Well, no surprise, it's going to be similar to Tim's response. I'm not going to here comment on that, on the resignations. You would have to talk to the 2 individuals. But what I can comment is the environment that I try to foster, and that was an environment of collaboration and respect and understanding. And I believe that the last year and a half, 2 years, on our journey of rebuilding relationships, Tim had mentioned the Indigenous Education Leadership Table, which, by the way, is a first for British Columbia. Us appointing an Indigenous Assistant Superintendent is a first in British Columbia. We have done many profound and big things on our journey of rebuilding relationships and truth and reconciliation. And as Roy mentioned, UNDRIP, which is law. And we're all on this journey. It's not just us, it's all of us, every single one of us. And if we're going to move forward, we all have to move towards that journey of truth and reconciliation.
Thank you, Ron. John Zakowski, right next door. John is number 26 on your cards, everyone. John, you've been a vocal advocate for the needs of business owners in Prince George's downtown as a business owner yourself. If elected, you will also be a representative of the rest of the community at large, including the unhoused population. How will you represent the needs of people living in poverty who are or people who are accessing the illicit drug supply, or people who are unhoused, in instances where their needs might conflict with the needs of downtown businesses?
Well, it's very simple. As a representative sitting on council, I represent or will represent everyone. Homeless, the addicted, folks with businesses, folks that go to work Monday to Friday. My job is to turn around and be available to you to listen to your concerns. Take them before other members of council and the mayor and voice those concerns in open conversation to try to work to a solution. When you represent the community, it's border to border all the way around, and then even leaning into the regional district, because you got to play well with your neighbors. So that's the important key that I'm going to try to bring to council. I will always try to be available to everybody that has a concern and try to take those concerns forward to council and mayor and see if we can come up with a resolution. That's the plan.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Simon Yu, you're up next. And I'll remind everybody, Simon Yu is number 6 on your cards. Simon, within your platform, you propose building shelters and housing. Historically, the city of Prince George has left this responsibility to the province. If elected mayor, how do you intend to increase shelters and housing from a municipal responsibility level?
First of all, I do believe the shelter is a basic human right. Shelter doesn't necessarily mean a big house. It can be a very secure sleeping quarters for everybody, have to be made available. Nobody can live without a proper, good night of sleep. As simple as that. I think what we're really facing here as a community there's a two community. It's a breakdown of the communication, the community as a whole. We need to reestablish our relationship, everybody. Whether you have a home, whether you have no home, we are one community. We need to know each other. Prince George used to be a 1-2-step town. Right now, between us, maybe become a 3 or 4 step, because we need to get to know each other. And as a mayor, to solve the problem, I need to know individually what exactly caused the problem and how to resolve it. But first thing first, you must have a good night's sleep in a secure place. I intend to build it. I have experience in doing emergency relief shelters. We have the resources in this town. Just give me the number. We'll get it done.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Richard Cook. Oh, there you are. I couldn't see you from here. Richard Cook is number 8 on your forms, everyone. Richard, during your campaign, you've reduced the issue of homelessness to a drug problem, saying unhoused people are unhoused because they're on drugs, and treatment will lead to employment. But 40% of people living in poverty have a mental or physical disability that prevents them from being able to work. What will you do on council to increase support for people with disabilities?
Well, first of all, you need to contact the local people who are doing alcohol and drug programs, who are probably not familiar of clients other than those who are taking alcohol. Alcohol systems have an incredible program going, because when their best friend usually says, you need help. And that takes a long, long time. If you're going to treat the alcohol or the drug program, you're going to have a minimum of 9 months treatment center. Somewhere they'll be referred to, probably by their best friend, or somebody else will take
Richard, can you
it.
hold your microphone just up to your mouth so we can hear you a bit better? Thank you.
You'll need about a year for the program, the therapy to take place. Once the person is treated by a real professional and not some card carrying from some university in the United States, please stay away from that. You need an expert who's in charge of the resource, and you put yourself 9 months minimum, because the revolving door simply doesn't work. If you're good for 30 days, forget the treatment altogether. You're
All right.
stuck for at least 1 year. Hopefully progress will be made. Sorry to be so long.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. The next question is for Doug Jeffrey. Where's Doug? All right. I can't see the folks down on the end very well, so thank you for being patient with me. Doug Jeffrey is number 10 on your list, everyone. Doug, you've campaigned on the idea of building a tiny home subdivision outside of the downtown, as well as a suggestion that the province needs to build a large mental health facility to help address the current housing crisis. How is the unhoused population included in your vision of Prince George's downtown core?
Humanities, we've lost our way. How is it that a country like Canada can have a homeless problem from one end of the country to the other? I've talked to people from the Maritimes, Ontario. There's other cities that have the exact same problem as us. Go on YouTube and search homeless. You'll find the same thing happening in San Francisco, Oakland, it's all over. Mankind, womankind, we've lost our way. Homeless should be a basic right. Elon Musk lives in a tiny home. Yeah, he's a little bit nerdy and a little bit different. Clearly, tiny homes is a solution. We would need to change the bylaws, the building bylaws in City of Prince George, and would hopefully get some corporate and provincial partners. The solution is there, but the priorities need to change in terms of the city fathers and mothers. We need to change our direction in how we're trying to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Carman is up next, and Carm is number 13. Carm, you've said that racism is manufactured to create division. However, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report asserts that reconciliation can't happen without truth. One part of that is the recognition of the ongoing race-based discrimination, negative stereotyping, and injustice experienced by Indigenous peoples in Canada. If elected, how will you contribute to reconciliation if you believe racism is only manufactured to create division?
If you take a look at me, I was born as a Sikh here in Prince George, BC. I was the only kid with a turban. There's maybe 10 schools. I grew up in a racist society. I experienced what you experienced here. I have lived a life. My job is to empower people. I have gone to 50 sweat lodges. This is true. I 100% believe, and part of my solution is to bring back that culture and the spirituality. Can you repeat that end part of the question? How am I gonna?
If elected, how will you contribute to reconciliation?
We need to, it's what the guys are talking, we need to get back all with unity. Diversity divides. That's where I was speaking. We are one, and once we all come to one, the whole city has to come to this. All of you, all of them. Everyone wants the same solution. Ask them. And that's where we're sitting at, and that's what we're going to do.
Thank you, Carm. The next one is for Garth Frizzell and Corey Ramsey. Garth is number 9. And Garth, you were on council to approve the last budget. However, while the budget for police remains at over $30 million for 2022, there's an absence of funding specifically devoted to improving conditions for unhoused residents. How do you plan to incorporate the needs of people who are unhoused into the budget going forward?
Oh, thanks, Audrey. And it's warm up here. How is it out there? Is it? Yeah.
It's hotter where you're sitting.
Fair's fair. The budget for policing gets all but set in advance for years and years and years. The province negotiates a deal with the federal government. The federal government sets what the wages are going to be, and we get percentage increases that way. Specifically, though, coming up in December, there's going to be an opportunity for us to make an application to the Rapid Housing Accelerator Fund. It's a federal fund. The challenge is that we're going to have a new mayor and council, and typically there's a honeymoon where things don't go quickly. Well, we can't wait. We have to get an application into this. It's an unprecedented program where federal money comes directly to municipalities without going through the province or the territory. And it's an opportunity for us. It builds on the work that the FCM had did with the Rapid Housing Initiative last year, but that money all went to the big cities. We don't have the luxury to sit back and not put in an application. That's a concrete measure we'll jump on.
Thank you, Garth. Corey Ramsey is up next. Corey Ramsey is number 17 on your forms. Corey, do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
You were on council to approve the last budget. However, while the budget for police remains at over $30 million for 2022, there's an absence of funding specifically devoted to improving conditions for unhoused residents. How do you plan to incorporate the needs of people who are unhoused into the budget going forward?
Yeah, great question. I will say that I, in my work on council, called for a review of the RCMP budget. It was quite contentious. That is supposed to be coming back in the next term of council, so they'll be able to review that budget line specifically. In terms of how we can incorporate budget items for unhoused, I think many other communities are putting aside land reserves for BC Housing when they're approached to work on land deals for housing. Sorry, that horn threw me off track. So similar to the First Avenue project, the city put $4.5 million forward for that project. There is the expectation provincially that BC Housing's mandate is to provide housing, so that's something they should do, but every other community is also putting forward money to entice BC Housing to come to their communities for those low barrier, sustainable, complex care housing projects. So if we want to attract those, I do believe we need to set aside money in the budget specifically for that purpose.
Thank you, Corey. We're going to hand the mic back to Garth. The order for this group question is Garth Frizzell, Cameron Stoltz, and John Zakowski. So yeah, other ends of the table here. So Garth first, and Garth's number 9 on your forms. So you each displayed profound compassion for seniors during the North Central Labour Council Forum and made numerous promises focused on improving their quality of life and community integration. How do you plan to apply that same level of action-oriented compassion to the unhoused population, many of whom are seniors themselves?
Yeah, you hit on the answer to that right at the beginning, Audrey. And here we are on the unceded ancestral territory, the Lheidli in one of the richest countries in the world, and we still have poverty and we still have homelessness. It's ridiculous, and it's one of the pieces that we inherit from the colonial system that we have. Federal is bigger than municipal. There's provincial in between. There's First Nations. The problem is the system that was set up isn't built to handle the challenges of the 21st century. And the answer to it is boring as heck. For the last 10 years, I've been trying to inch a piece here and there to get the federal government and the provincial government to move. You can't do this alone. We're all in this together, and you have to get friends from other municipalities and other territories and make the case to the federal government. We've been successful in some places, and it feels like we're inching ahead really slowly. It's true, we are. And people live their lives in real time. But that's the fight, and I'll keep up the fight if I get reelected. Thanks.
Thank you, Garth. Cameron Stoltz. I'll repeat the question, yeah. Do you want to wait till you have the mic in hand first? All right, you can do 2 things at once, that's great. So you displayed profound compassion for seniors during the North Central Labour Council Forum and made numerous promises focused on improving their quality of life and community integration. How do you plan to apply that same level of action-oriented compassion to the unhoused population, many of whom are seniors themselves?
So the biggest challenge with the unhoused is the fact that they don't have an affordable place to live. There is a serious lack of affordable places to live in our community right now because we've experienced a tremendous boom over the last 4 or 5 years. From my perspective, there's 2 pieces to this. The way you make affordable housing is having more of it available. That makes it cheaper for people who are looking for somewhere to go. That means when we look at the official community plan, we should be changing how we're building our new subdivisions. We don't need more $1-million homes on the hills. We need more mixed housing, multifamily, and small lot housing available, so that way people can stay in their community as they age. The second part of that is then making more housing available for seniors in general. It's not just about the unhoused, it's for everyone. It's not just about seniors, it's for everyone. And that part is requiring provincial aid with BC Housing to be able to provide supportive housing and projects that are being put forward. There's an opportunity for us to partner with them to have mixed use facilities where you have some of the rental property is market rent, some of it is subsidized, and some of it is free rent, depending on who's living in the facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. John, do you need me to repeat the question?
No.
All right, just a reminder, John Zakowski is number 26 on your forms.
Well, we've got a bit of a bonus with this election in Prince George. The bonus for us is that we have several other northern communities that have also changed mayors, councillors, and with that brings a whole body of new people to the table that have the same problems we have here, taking it to Victoria. So when you have fresh people, you have fresh initiative. With that, you have the fresh motivation to put pressure on Victoria to look at supportive housing, subsidized housing. There's other programs, but together, all the northern communities making a voice will be able to push more on BC Housing. So that's the plan. New council, new voices throughout the north to push Victoria to make some changes.
Thank you, John. Brian Skaken is up next. And Brian, as a reminder to everybody, is number 22. Brian, during your campaign, you've spoken about working with the provincial government to come up with solutions to the problems we're discussing tonight. But municipal governments also have an important role to play in directly impacting housing poverty and safety for drug users. You are seeking your 7th term on council.
And last, yeah.
Was that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Outside of liaising with, I thought you were correcting me, outside of liaising with the provincial government, what have you done in the last 16 years on council to reduce poverty and homelessness, and what will you do with another 4 years?
Well, I'm the chair of the Intergovernmental Resolutions Committee, and that committee works with the North Central Local Government Association, the UBCM, Councillor Ramsey and her group, and we have to lobby the senior governments to live up to their responsibilities when it comes to housing. We've gone after money in the opioid class action lawsuits. We've tried to work with BC Housing on a number of initiatives, and it was mentioned First Avenue before. I mean, I work tirelessly in council, in open and closed meetings. We've had some really contentious meetings behind the scenes when it comes to some of these things. We deal with different ministries. We had a meeting with Minister Eby earlier this year to express our concerns, but I will always work hard on behalf of the residents of the community, all the residents. And just as a note, a lot of times when we have a council meeting that starts at 3, ends at 5, I end up taking a walk and we have a dinner break. I'll take a walk downtown, go through the back alleys, talk to a lot of the folks on the streets, and, you know, just to say hi, shake their hands, and let them know that I care about them. And, you know, I'll bring that to the table again and again. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right, next we have a group question, and this one goes to Tim Bennett, Doug Jeffrey, and Ron Polillo, in that order. Tim Bennett's number 7. Each of you has spoken about different models used in other communities. Doug, you spoke about Switzerland. Ron, you spoke about Medicine Hat. And Tim, you spoke about the Victoria model in other forums as examples of how to address poverty and homelessness. What are the components of the model you're advocating for, and how would you apply those solutions to Prince George?
Absolutely. So there's a few different models that I've spoken about. So one would be right now what's being done in Victoria around creating a tiny home village to support those who are unhoused. I also look at examples such as what's happening in Valemount and what's happening in Smithers through partnerships to create public washroom facilities. And that is something I've spoken about numerous times, is looking at how communities are able to leverage partnerships, grant dollars, and community partners to be able to bring together and create real tangible items to help promote equity and accessibility in our community, and especially in downtown. So when I look at communities like Valemount, they were able to secure the funding to get those self-cleaning downtown washrooms built in their community. So it's how do we continue to work together and look at what's happening in other communities. Yes, we need a Made in Prince George solution, but let's also not reinvent the wheel. That's just a waste of taxpayer dollars.
Thank you, Tim. Doug Jeffrey is number 10. Doug, do you need me to repeat the question? All right. You've spoken about different models. Doug, have spoken about the Switzerland model as an example of how to address poverty and homelessness. What are the components of the model you're advocating for, and how would you apply those solutions to Prince George?
So I got the idea from a doctor who gave me a book called Chasing the Scream, and it's about drug addiction. And he said, Doug, you need to rely on science. Unfortunately, I haven't finished the book. I've been campaigning too much. But, you know, a little while ago, I went on a campaign to build a wheelchair lift for a public hall. I got 3 grants, one from Rick Hansen, one from the federal government, and one regional. We got about $140,000. I believe sincerely that magic happens when people work together. There's a creative energy that sometimes just brings solutions that aren't there from intellectual perspective. And when I built that wheelchair lift, I collaborated with a lot of other people, and now it's operational and working. I will finish the book, and I'll share the book with other council candidates. Switzerland is a right-leaning government, but this social experiment with Chasing the Screen that they took on, they've been very, very successful.
Thank you, Doug. Ron Polillo, number 16. Do you need me to repeat the question, Ron?
No, I think I got it.
Okay.
So this idea actually was introduced to me just recently by Jerry Chidiak, who's contributor to the Prince George Citizen, is a teacher in School District 57. Some of you may know him. And he wrote an academic paper on the Medicine Hat model. And I have to admit, I haven't delved into it in great depth, but what I have, it's very impressive. Medicine Hat is the first city in Canada to achieve net zero chronic homelessness. And they achieved that in June of 2021. And they created this model under this one umbrella society. And it had, you know, 3 or 4 components to it. First and foremost, it, of course, had a housing component, had a mental health and addictions component, advocacy, because they needed advocacy to governments to help them achieve this. They had a land acquisition model as well, too, acquiring land. So in a nutshell, what I can explain, a very complex system that worked very well in 60 seconds. But I encourage all of you to do the research that I did and Google Medicine Hat Net Zero Chronic Homeless. It's, I think, something that we can bring to our community, something that's worked, and make a Prince George solution from that.
Thank you, Ron. Susan Scott, you're taking the next question, and Susan is number 20 on your forms. Susan, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission call to action number 43 calls on all levels of government to fully adopt and implement UNDRIP, and the BCAFN has called on municipalities across BC to prioritize their relationships with unhoused people as part of the path to reconciliation. What have you done in your 8 years on council to prioritize that relationship, and what will you do with another term if elected?
Thank you for the question. I have, I've walked the streets. I've been to the fire pit. I've been to the encampment. I have met people, and I have put a face to the issue. And that has served me as I sit in a council chair to make decisions. I can't imagine what every single person in this city goes through unless I get out and ask questions and listen. So that's what I do to inform myself to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Kyle Sampson's up next. Kyle's number 19 on your forms, everyone. Kyle, you apologized in March this year for calling people who commit crimes a bunch of losers who don't deserve to have any empathy or sympathy given towards them. And you said you would push to make them feel as unwelcome as possible. Many people who commit crimes do so out of necessity for survival because their basic needs aren't being met. Since your apology in March, what have you done to reconcile your comments and understand the complexity of the core needs of people who are more likely to commit survival crimes?
Thanks very much, and absolutely. So when I made that comment, I spoke unfairly, and I spoke about out of frustration about a report we had recently received regarding prolific offenders. And so I want to be clear that I was not speaking about people who are committing crimes out of necessity. It was people targeting folks who are in that situation or folks who are not in that situation. When it comes to what have I done to better understand the situation, I've spoken to people on all sides of this issue. I've spoken to law enforcement to better understand the situation that they're facing with prolific offenders. I've spoken with people from groups like Activators or other organizations in our community that help folks who are coming out of a life of crime, trying to rehabilitate into our community to better understand the situation that they're in, and take a bit more of a empathetic approach to why they were in that life. I still believe that prolific offenders, people who are committing crime in our community and people who are preying on vulnerable populations deserve to be held accountable. However, I want to be clear that my views on people who are committing crimes of necessity need to be helped. They need to be given resources to get in a situation where they do not have to commit those crimes, and that they are not looking for resources that should be not provided to them through having to commit crimes. Thanks.
Thank you, Kyle. Karen Muir, number 15. I got your number right? Okay, thank you. I got the M's all mixed up for some reason. I'm sorry about that. Karen Muir is number 15. Karen, you've said during your campaign that your heart is with the people of downtown who lack support and genuine action. What action will you specifically take on council to increase the safety and quality of life of unhoused people and people accessing the illicit drug supply?
I think to begin with, I would try to address the housing situation or the lack of housing. I think, as has been noted, housing, stable, secure, safe, warm housing is the basis of everything. I mean, you can't expect somebody to improve their mental health, improve their physical health, improve their employment situation, or anything like that if they're not if they don't have a safe, secure place to sleep and store their belongings as well. So I think that is one of the first problems that needs to be tackled or challenges by the new city council. I also think that there needs to be increased public bathrooms and garbage services, regardless of whether people might believe that people should be gathering somewhere or not. They're humans who deserve dignity and those basic services to maybe provide some amount of not comfort, but safety or survival. Yeah, I think those are my keys.
Thank you, Karen. The next question is a group question, and this one will go to Trudy Clausen, Colleen Mahoney, Car Manhus, Wes Mitchell, and James Steidel. So Trudy, number 11. Many people with physical or mental disabilities live below the poverty line and are especially vulnerable to becoming unhoused as they struggle to meet their basic needs while receiving $16,000 a year on benefits. What will you implement and advocate for on council to meet the needs of people with disabilities in Prince George?
I think the numbers of people that we see here show exactly what we have been seeing on the campaign, that this is a huge problem. Like the fact that we have so many people, so many more people unhoused in the last number of years, it's been very evident on the campaign trail when I've been talking to people. And especially for, I mean, we know that the amount of money that someone who is on disability, what they get is so low, and with our housing supply being so stressed and just basic housing going up and up and up, we really need to be working together with our federal and provincial counterparts to make some improvements there. There are many ideas, and I've got like a whole wad full of ideas that I've gotten, and my approach to these types of things, and because this is not something that I consider myself an expert in, is to ask the experts and to ask the people who are intimately involved, and to get feedback from those people. I do the research, but then I get the research from the people that intimately know the problem, and because the solutions are best found by those who know the problem the best.
Thank you, Trudy. Colleen Mahoney is number 12. Colleen, do you need me to repeat the question?
That was a long question. So
Yeah, they're all long questions. Many people with physical or mental disabilities live below the poverty line and are especially vulnerable to becoming unhoused as they struggle to meet their basic needs while receiving $16,000 a year on benefits. What will you implement and advocate for on council to meet the needs of people with disabilities in Prince George?
That's an interesting question. As you say, people who become unhoused, it's often from many different perspectives. I think there's also a concern in our province with seniors becoming unhoused because of assistance problems, and also you think of the students as well. I think part of the biggest thing that we can do as a city council is to be looking at different ideas for housing. It's not just about single family dwellings, it's about having mixed use, it's about accessibility, it's about making the city accessible to everyone, and that means walking, that means biking, that means accessibility for things other than a car. Having, commercial areas accessible to everyone so everybody can get food, everyone has access to a green space. Thinking ahead when you're planning about what you're putting, where you're putting things, because not necessarily who you are targeting, but who you are excluding. You have to look at it as a broad picture, and I think that multi-pronged is kind of where you need to be.
Thank you, Colleen. Car Manhus? And Carm is number 13 on your cards. Carm, do you need the question again?
Just one more time, please. Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, you say one more time, but I'm going to have to repeat it 3 more times. So, many people with physical or mental disabilities live below the poverty line and are especially vulnerable to becoming unhoused, struggling to meet their basic needs while receiving $16,000 a year on benefits. What will you implement and advocate for on council to meet the needs of people with disabilities in Prince George?
First of all, that 16,000 is pretty painful sounding, and I think anyone in this society would say so. That's ridiculous. And we'd have to look at that. But, you know, right away, housing, I think it's got to maybe perhaps triage. I've met a lot of people on the street, and I've asked them, and getting communication. That's what's going to take everybody's, once again, unity. We all come together, everybody. That we would triage into their option if they wanted to go into certain gender-based. There certain ladies have messaged me, and I talked to them, and they felt most safe that way. And give the option to the seniors as well. Every level of this barrier needs a permanent staff, even at the lowest barrier. Actually would save more money for taxes and someone ready to triage on the spot. And you know, once again, when the community partners, we have enough advocates already right now to implement this stuff, and no need to wait around any longer. And that's what I propose. We go right away. We start get organized right away.
Thank you, Carm. Wes Mitchell is number 14, and you're up next, Wes. Wes, do you need me to repeat the question? I don't mind, even though I complained. Okay. Many people with physical or mental disabilities live below the poverty line and are especially vulnerable to becoming unhoused as they struggle to meet their basic needs while receiving $16,000 a year on benefits. What will you implement and advocate for on council to meet the needs of people with disabilities in Prince George?
Well, first of all, we'd have to look into the budget. I need the knowledge within what we can do with the city. Definitely looking into building more, like with the developers, looking for bigger complexes, smaller units with accessibility for our seniors and those with mental disabilities. Just continue those developments and looking, you know, into our community. What I do right now is I reach out and I put action towards fundraising, put action towards businesses that can afford to put money into these small, complex, either tiny houses or these units that I'm talking about, small units within a big apartment. You know, that are accessible. I really agree with the green space and the food that can be delivered to them. We have Aim High. We have all these places that can deliver. You know, we can even get our local Save On Foods to bring the food that's supplied there. We have people in Prince George that are always willing to help. And, you know, when we can get them food, get them around for some entertainment and some livelihood and a safe, affordable place with some grants and funding, we have a success.
Thank you, Wes. James Steidel, number 23. Do you want the question repeated?
I think I'm okay.
Okay.
I think a lot of great points brought up here. Definitely need to look at that $16,000 and advocate for an increase to that. That's huge. Secondly, housing and accessible spaces that are, you know, close to downtown. I never would have tore down the Simon Fraser Hotel. I think that was a huge mistake. That had 124 units in there. Recently been renovated for $11 million, and the city bought it for $4 million, and then we leveled it. Plus another $2 million for asbestos remediation. I think those are the kinds of things that we should be questioning on city council and saying, hey, this could have been awesome housing. Accessibility, so the grocery store downtown, once that leaves, that's gonna be a huge problem for folks on disability that don't have good transportation. Like once that grocery store is gone, there's gonna be huge challenges getting food. I mean, hopefully we can rely on delivery, but you know, a lot of folks like to walk there. And the other thing within city jurisdiction, I think, is things like third places, places where people can have recreation and engage physical contact with each other and maintain a community. I think we got to, as a city, work on protecting those kinds of places and encouraging them. Thank you.
Thank you, James. This one is well, it's a group question, but it's for two. That's still a group, right? Richard Cook, number 8. Sorry, Jen. And then Paul Sarap will be next. And then we're going to head to our last. Just in this round, one more question for all of the mayors, and thank you to everyone for all your patience, because I know there's so many people that you're waiting for your turn to talk, and thank you to everybody for sitting here and listening to all these answers. It's really awesome. So Richard is number 8. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission released 94 calls to action in 2015. If elected, how will you prioritize the calls to action within that report that are directed towards municipalities?
Well, first of all, we have to prepare a community plan, and that should be part and parcel of the community plan. Secondly, we should learn to trust one another, and a very simple thing we could start off with, I would say, is that have a dinner together. I lived with the Nisga'a people for 5 years, and dinners and other feasts did a lot for all of us because the politicians didn't speak there. I think we need to get down to the grassroots, have a meal together, and plan it out from there. Learn to have friends with the Nisga'a and learn to have friends with the local Lake Latani people. they will become your friend also. So that's what I'm suggesting. Keep it simple. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Paul Sarup is number 21. Do you need the question again, Paul? The Truth and Reconciliation Commission released 94 calls to action in 2015. If elected, how will you prioritize the calls to action within that report that are directed towards municipalities?
Well, I guess we would look at all of them and what we could do reasonably in the next, if I was elected in the next term. I like Richard's answer. We should try to be, as he says, friends with everybody and get to know folks. I grew up with a gentleman, I think he's from the Okanagan, but he was a Aboriginal, and we worked together, and we were friends, and as I say, we would look at them all and see what we could do. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. All right, the final question of this round goes to all 6 mayoral candidates, and we're going to go in this order. Adam Hyatt first, Terry McConaughey, Lisa Mitchell, Roy Stewart, and Simon Yu. Adam Hyatt is number 1 on your list, everyone. So for all of you, at a previous forum, all 6 of you were asked an important question by Jules, who's standing behind me here, specifically about overdose deaths associated with smoking substances as opposed to injecting them. However, not one of you gave a direct answer to the question, so I'm going to give you another opportunity to and ask it again. While Prince George does have safe injection services, the majority of overdose deaths in BC are associated with smoking. If elected, what will you do to mitigate overdose deaths that are a result of smoking substances?
Well, I think I gave a bit of a direct answer. It's my goal to help people stop using drugs, and it's a lot easier for me to get behind that sort of principle. So a safe injection site, though probably necessary now in the short term, I would hope that that site will not be necessary in the future. I have an easier time getting behind helping people stop using drugs than helping people continue to use drugs, and that includes injection, smoking, or otherwise. So, I think with a world-class rehabilitation facility that I've proposed, I think with barrier-free housing, and hopefully giving people a very solid option to take that help, we can eliminate drug overdoses of any kind. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the energy in the room. I know that this is really important, and please take it to the polls. I've asked that everybody refrain from both applause and from speaking to the candidates right now. Terry McConaughey is number 2 on our list. You need the question again, Terry?
Sure, please.
I'll just repeat the last part of the question. While Prince George does have a safe injection services, the majority of overdose deaths in BC are associated with smoking. If elected, what will you do to mitigate overdose deaths that are a result of smoking substances?
Absolutely. While we all recognize that senior levels of government are the levels that are responsible for mental health, housing, and addictions, there are things that we must do and can do at our community municipal level. And one of those things is working with our groups and the folks that are in the trenches, boots on the ground. I just recently learned that of this very statistic, that it is inhalation, and it was my understanding that we had something like this at one time. However, it is not there anymore. So I am not an expert on all things, but we have a lot of knowledge and a lot of compassion and a lot of creativity in this room. And as your mayor, I would definitely tap into that and work with my council colleagues just to determine what are some of the things that we can accomplish to help folks that are I asked Jules once, I said, I am so confused, I don't know, Jules, am I supposed to be advocating for abstinence or safe supply? And she said, both. And so we shall.
Thank you, Terry. Lisa Mitchell. And Lisa Mitchell is number 3. Do you need the question again, Lisa?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, Prince George does have safe injection services. The majority of overdose deaths in BC are associated with smoking substances. If elected, what will you do to mitigate overdose deaths that are a result of smoking substances?
Well, I think that subject is so huge. It's really, we have to look at like community people, talking to people in the community, family. We have to get family involved. We have to stop the stigma of this, and we have to bring it out in the open. And it's got to be first and foremost. It's got to be the elephant in the room that we have to tackle, because, like you said, people dying, it's not an option. So we have to start looking at the rehabilitation, what put them in the situation in the first place, and find out, like, why this is happening, what's happening, and why it's so dire. Because, like, I don't know where that statistic comes from. It's mind-boggling.
Thank you, Lisa. Roy Stewart, number 4 on your list, everybody. Roy, do you need the question again?
No, thank you. It's fine. My view is that rehabilitation is an important aspect of this, but education is another key ingredient. I don't know if it's possible for an addict who needs to smoke some substance to be educated about the dangers. There's more, probably from that point of view, more concern that that person just wants the substance. We have to take measures to control this, but that's provincial, federal, health-related measures. We don't have the resources or the expertise in this town to deal with that. I would hope that as a community we can educate people more thoroughly about the risks they're taking, but I don't think we can honestly prevent people from taking those risks. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. And Simon Yu is number 6. And Simon, do you need the question, or are you good?
Yeah, based on my understanding of the situation, foremost, we need to have a safe drug. I mean, the thing is, we need to also be very hard on people knowingly selling the drug might have problems. And I believe the science might be there, just for people simple to test whether the drugs are safe or not. And also, I will advocate, we need to have a better monitoring system for when the people are using drugs, so when they get into trouble, they can call for some help. But I think foremost that we need a safe drug, or else we got problems. Because this is a bad drug's almost a form of killing people. These criminals, if knowingly selling bad drugs, should be really punished. And I just think, the law, we need to ask the next level of government to see the people selling bad drugs, what kind of punishment should be, manslaughter, because this is a serious issue. But in the meantime, we need to have a safe drug on the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. All right, I feel like I need a stretch overhand because we just concluded our second round of questioning. We are going to continue, though. I thank all the candidates for participating in that. We're going to switch tactics now to a final round of questions, and then we're going to have some trivia. Each of your names is in this cup, and I carefully dumped them all on the counter and made sure they were actually really randomized because I cut them and they were all kind of stuck in there the same. So I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to draw 3 to 4 names from this cup. And if I draw your name, please answer the question, and we'll go with the same rules applying up to a minute to answer the question. So what did I say? I'd ask the question first, right? Here's the first one. Many decisions in council impact the unhoused population and those accessing the illicit drug supply. What will you do, if elected, to include these members of the community in the decision-making process, especially when it impacts their lives directly? And I've got James Steidle first.
Consultation. I think we got to have openness at City Hall. I don't think just at the city council level. I think at the bureaucratic level as well. I think there's a lot of stuff that's being decided in City Hall that isn't being properly consulted, and then it becomes a motion before council, and that's a lot of times it's kind of a surprise, I think, to City Council. So I think we got to have a better culture of transparency in our bureaucracies. I think one of the things about Canada is the bureaucracy is not transparent. Like, you know, if you're trying to FOI stuff, you just get empty pages all the time, and you try to appeal it, you get nothing. So, yeah, I think just a culture of transparency, and we don't have that right now. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Garth Frizzell. Oh, we'll have to just pass this one down. Jen's occupied.
Thanks. Thank you. Can't imagine what it was like 20, 30 years ago when you had one method of communication. Now we have Facebook, and that's not enough. We still have the Citizen, that's not enough. TV, phone calls, emails, that's not enough. One of the interesting ideas comes of all places from Ukraine. We were there in 2019 seeking to teach them about democratic governance and how it's done in Canada. And what we saw was, while we were waiting for the mayor of Vinnytsia to come out, was, sorry, he's busy. Every Friday he meets with the people. And we saw this great long line. It was like office hours. For you students who are here tonight, it was an opportunity to meet with the mayor. I think that's an idea that's time has come, and we should look for that, not just for the mayor though, but for all the members of council, to be accessible, because some people don't have access to the internet. Some people don't read the newspapers, and some people don't use a phone. So that face-to-face piece, yes. With MyPG, we also went out into the community. So let's take Talktober and let's spread that out across the year.
Thank you, Garth. I pulled Brian Skaken next.
Can you repeat the questions, please?
Absolutely. Many decisions on council impact the unhoused population and people accessing the illicit drug supply. What will you do if elected to include these members of the community in the decision-making process, especially when it impacts their lives directly?
Well, thanks for the question. First thing, I have a lot of empathy. You know, I've been around 12-step programs most of my life. The people that are trying to turn their lives around, they're the folks I think that we need to talk to. But every 4 years at the beginning of our term, we have a strategic plan, and we direct our administration to come up with, you know, it could be environmental issues and a number of other issues. So what we have to do, whoever's on the next council, is direct administration to come up with some plan or plans to deal with these issues, have a reporting back structure on, you know, how they're going and what some of the shortcomings might be, and then talk to the different groups. There's so many different groups in town that, especially the service providers downtown, that can give us the advice, because we don't know it all. But what we have to do is make it a priority of the new council to say, this is what we want, direct our administration to do it, come back with a plan, and live up to the commitment of that plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right, I'll start a new question. The question is, do you believe drug users should have access to a safe, regulated supply of drugs? And please explain why or why not. And the first name I've got is Ron Polillo. Jen's wishing she had a step counter right now.
The simple answer to that question is yes. It's a priority, and we heard when bad drugs are out there, it kills. And that's what has led to a large degree to the overwhelming opioid crisis that we have in the province, and you're right, in northern British Columbia. We're unfortunately leading the province, and that is not what we want. We need to change that. So part of the strategy is having safe injection sites.
Thank you, Ron. Doug Jeffrey.
Yeah, repeat it again, please.
Do you believe drug users should have access to a safe, regulated supply of drugs? And please explain why or why not.
I've got a very close friend whose son got hooked on meth, and she tried for 10 years to get him off it. And eventually she had to break off the relationship with her own son because she was falling apart. The answer to the question for me is yes. When I was younger and I was 16 years old, I did a lot of marijuana. And it's not a hard drug at all. And then I discovered meditation, and I quit cold turkey. But the thing that I noticed after I quit was you stop hanging around with the same people. And that was just my journey. The Switzerland model does talk about harm reduction. I'm not an expert on this, but if a doctor who I respect highly is a surgeon and he's saying that's our only choice to get out of this is listen to the science, I think he's onto something.
Thank you. Next, we've got Paul Sarup. I'll repeat the question while you're walking. It's a good strategy. Do you believe drug users should have access to a safe, regulated supply of drugs? And please explain why or why not.
Well, I would say in general, no. I think that people, I would like everyone in this community to have their very best life, and that does not include being on drugs. How many people here are on drugs? How many of the candidates? No, I'm just, okay, okay, we're getting audience participation.
Audience got a
but-
freebie on that
but
one
I-
because you turned the questioning around, so.
Okay. But I really don't, I don't think that's really your best life. And so I would say in general, no. My answers on issues of homelessness, I think have been evolving as I talk to more people, as I become more aware of what's going on. So, but that's what it is right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. We'll give this one to one more person. Karen Muir. Do you need the question?
Sure.
Do you believe drug users should have access to a safe, regulated drug supply? And please explain why or why not.
Sorry. Yes, because dead people can't get help. My brother died of a fentanyl overdose in meth last year. And yeah, I mean, dead people can't get help, so yes.
Thank you, Karen. All right, we're going to change to a new question. A lot of new homelessness is a result of youth in their teens aging out of care. What is your plan to prevent homelessness in the younger generation? And the first name I've got is Wes Mitchell.
What I'm going to continue to do is we're going to have open and closed committees within our city council. I'm going to continue to work with our school districts. I'm a knowledge keeper with Aboriginal School District, and I've been working with the kids. And we got to get that early child development, whether their family or their home life is good or bad. You know, we can't rely on all the teachers, but we've got to rely on people with experience that are in there to bring life to our youth, right? And to continue to bring new opportunities for them within culture, within just bringing my life experience within a quick, I can't really do this in 90 seconds, but to continue to advocate within our community, to continue to put the actions. I'm not a man of talk, I'm a man of action. And what I put out in the community, I want to put out in our city council, and I want to put that in 110% within our community, at our schools, on the streets, and wherever I may roam on my relations.
Thank you, Wesley. Kyle Sampson. You want me to repeat the question?
Please, yeah.
A lot of new homelessness is a result of youth in their teens aging out of care. What is your plan to prevent homelessness in the younger generation?
Thanks for that. I think housing specifically, transitional housing for people who are in care, who are in the system, aging out, they need a affordable, reliable source, place to live. And so encouraging development for people who need affordable housing, creating a fast track process for developers who are looking to build more housing here that are going to keep affordable units. I think that's number one. And then on the flip side, I'm not 100% sure how the city's role plays into this, but I do believe in education being the number one piece. And so hearing Wesley speak, I agree with the need for getting at folks as they're young, and whether their home life is solid or maybe a bit rockier, we need to help those folks be on a path that's going to help them be successful. So For me, I think it's two-piece, having affordable housing, dedicated housing for young people, and then also the education piece. I'm just not sure how that exactly the city plays a role in that yet. Thanks.
Thank you, Kyle. Tim Bennett. I'll repeat it while she's walking. A lot of new homelessness is a result of youth in their teens aging out of care. What is your plan to prevent homelessness in the younger generation?
So I think there's a few different things that we need to focus on. And first off is how do we address the immediate need while also then thinking proactively down the road. And I think the immediate need, I'm reminded by conversations I've had around with our First Nations rights holders that nothing about us without us. And it's going to be incredibly important that we have conversations with youth graduating the system or aging out of the system about what supports do they need. And it's going to be affordable, high-density housing opportunities with low barriers for them to be able to have somewhere to live. I think then, to follow up on Kyle's answer, when 6 out of 10 youth in care are not graduating high school, we need to do more. We need to do better. The city needs to continue to work with the school district to advocate for additional supports for youth in care. There are great initiatives for youth graduating the system to enter post-secondary, but the youth in care are not graduating out of the system, and we need to work with that. And that part of that is around prevention. It's working with some of the nonprofit partners, working with other community partners for early interventions and opportunities to support youth in care while they're young. So it's a balance between meeting the immediate needs and meeting the long care needs. And I apologize for the extra 10 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. I'll switch questions here. The next question is, Prince George's winters are exceptionally cold. People using shelters are kicked out during the day, and others don't have a warm place to sleep. What is your plan to make sure these people have somewhere to stay this winter? And the first person I have is Colleen Mahoney.
I think our city infrastructure, we have to reflect, if you don't want someone in a certain area, you have to give a place for them to be. Unfortunately, because of COVID, a lot of the drop-in centers have been closed. You can't talk and have community without talking to people and having a place to go. If that means it's a drop-in center, if that means a place to have a shower, if that means a place just to be able to talk with other people around a campfire, that is an important part of living here in Prince George. And I think that livability is the biggest thing. Yes, we do have cold winters, but we need to absolutely be thinking year-round. We need to be thinking how our space is being used and how can they be better used, and allow people to gather and allow people to mix with people that may not necessarily want to mix with. Sometimes you have to be uncomfortable, and I think that lots of different options need to be looked at in terms of just multiple use spaces. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colleen. Richard Cook. I'll repeat the question as well, Richard. Prince George's winters are exceptionally cold. People using shelters are kicked out during the day, and others don't have a warm place to sleep. What is your plan to make sure these people have somewhere to stay this winter?
Well, somewhere to stay means a roof over your head and a place that's warm and company that'll be there with you, regardless. We're all human beings. We have that fundamental need of not starving or freezing to death at night. That's an absolute minimum. So we need to build a shelter. I noticed at the bus stop, that building is completely closed off now. Why not use that bus stop where the bus is left, build in shelters, cubicles where people can stay for the long term, overnight or 2 days, whatever, and keep them warm, and also give them showers, ability to have a shower, and also have places where they can use the toilets. Otherwise, freezing to death is not an option for me, whatever you want. It's definitely not
Thank
that.
you. I'll ask the audience just to refrain from commenting. I know that this is a really important subject and everybody's really passionate about it. Thank you. All right, the next question is for John Zakowski. Or sorry, this is the same question, John. That sounds good.
Thanks.
Prince George's winters are exceptionally cold, and people using shelters are kicked out during the day, and others don't have a warm place to sleep. What is your plan to make sure these people have somewhere to stay this winter?
Well, that falls under the city's emergency preparedness plan, in my opinion. Because it's a northern community, there has to be shelter space. we have to look at how we're operating that and what we need to do to expand that. Even come worst case scenario, the shelter facilities that are independently run are full. We have to be able to have backup emergency shelter at any given time at the drop of a hat. If that means taking over a high school, so be it. But that comes down to our emergency preparedness, and I'd be happy to push that forward with council. Same thing, tossing them out in the morning. Given the temperatures, there has to be a criteria. Like so many of the other candidate members have said, you got to have space, and you got to know that it's going to be there for the next night. So that's what we need to look at moving forward.
Thank you, John. Next question. Throughout the campaign, many candidates have talked about consulting with experts on various subjects. Who do you consider to be the experts on homelessness, poverty, and the drug poisoning crisis? I've got Roy Stewart.
Thank you. I consider everyone in this room to be an expert on that topic, and the community activists that are hosting us tonight. Those are you and they are the people that can instruct us on so many aspects of this, and I'm perfectly willing to be educated. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, it goes to Trudy Clausen. Do you need the question again? Throughout the campaign, many candidates have talked about consulting with experts on various subjects. Who do you consider to be the experts on homelessness, poverty, and the drug poisoning crisis?
Well, I would say what Roy said. Many of the people in the room and the homeless and the advocates on their behalf and the social services agencies meeting the needs. I think the important thing that I would like to say about that is that we need, I really like what John said about the answer in regards to the colds, keeping people warm over the winter. We're almost in an emergency situation here. I mean, I would say that we are actually, and so we need to actually do this very, very quickly. We need to not be slow about our response. We need to get this in place for this winter. And we need to so I just would say to all of you, like for the advocates, prepare, get together, plan, so that you can, when called, that you can come to council with a plan. And I apologize, I have to leave for another meeting now, so thank you.
Thank you for sticking around you actually got all your answers in. So that was good timing. Susan, Scott, I'll give you the same question. Who do you consider to be the expert on homelessness, poverty, and the drug poisoning crisis?
I echo the idea of everyone in the room, but I also go to the MLAs, the MPs, who are exposed to communities all across our country, and they have a level of information that we haven't approached. I also, excuse me, I also turn to friends who are actively in the scene. Thank you.
And Simon, you're up next. Who do you consider to be the experts on homelessness, poverty, and the drug poisoning crisis?
I'm not an expert in mental illness or drug addiction. I know the problems, but when it comes to homeless, I believe I am the expert because I was representing this province when there was a tsunami. I went there to build homes. And the size of the home we built is 360 square feet for family of 4. So if I divide that number for every single one of you, you guys are, based on the United Nations standard, you are entitled to 90 square feet. And the number you were tossing around said $16,000. And if you divide by 90, that's $177 per square foot. We're almost there. I can do this. If you build a small, secure sleeping shelter for every single one of you, based on the United Nations standard, come on, this is the lumber area. We have the resource. We can do it. This is not a big issue.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
New question. How do you measure success when it comes to the city's role in poverty reduction? And this goes to Corey Ramsey.
Can you repeat it?
Yes, of course. How do you measure success when it comes to the city's role in poverty reduction?
This is a tough question. I have a background in marketing, and in my role, we measure success with dashboards and data that help inform us, and that data can come from qualitative or quantitative sources. We need to be constantly checking in with our public, our target stakeholders and our key audiences to be asking for that information so that we can grade ourselves as a community. I think that we need to all work on solutions and come up with what those look like, and then measure them effectively going forward so that we know how we're doing and be able to pivot as a community if it's not working. So I think that's what I got.
Thank you, Corey. Cameron Stoltz. How do you measure success when it comes to the city's role in poverty reduction?
So looking forward, how we'd measure success would be to see if there's actually a change happening in the downtown core. When we're looking at poverty reduction, there's very little the city is directly responsible for. This is a provincial and federal matter. So the question is how active and how proactive is the city being with your mayor and council and actually trying to get the voice out there for change. We have provincial government that's been status quo for the last 6 years. How do we get that to change? We talk about the disability amount that's received by people. At $16,000 a year, that's $8 an hour, half the minimum wage. And that's a provincial matter. It's a federal matter. By the time you pay your rent, you have almost no money left for food. I know that personally. My sister's on long-term disability. If she wasn't living with my dad, she couldn't live in the space they're in. And their mortgage is paid off. That's just utilities and food and taking care of the hydro and the gas and the phone. Like, it's ridiculous.
Thank you, Cameron. Lisa Mitchell. How do you measure success when it comes to the city's role in poverty reduction?
Well, I think the success will be when we see, the streets cleaned up, when we see, community come back to downtown, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take us as a community to solve this. It's not going to be done. We can ask for help by the government, but at the end of the day, it's our backyard. It's our job to fix our backyard. We can't ask anybody else to do it, and it's going to be a tough job, but that's how we're going to measure success, is by our little successes on the street, one person at a time. And once we start getting away from this homelessness situation and we're able to deal in it and it's not so overwhelming to everyone, maybe we can start getting back as a community and start opening our doors again and smiling at people and coming out and having the love that we used to have in this city when I first got here.
Thank you, Lisa. Last question here. I'm sure the three of you who are left know who's going to get called next. So a lot of people prefer to live at Moccasin Flats than staying in housing available because of security issues, the institutional nature of the environment, sobriety requirements, and a lack of privacy and respect. What housing alternatives and support will you advocate for on council? And this one goes to Adam Hyatt.
Yeah, so I think housing works, and I think it's a necessity. Again, I have a 4-point plan. The first one is to create a world-class treatment center. Hopefully, people choose to go to. The second one is barrier-free housing, and that hopefully means housing that you can go to and feel safe and secure inside of. Like I say. I don't agree in forcefully moving people with no other options. I also don't think it's fair to allow what is happening now to continue when there are quality options. So I want to aggressively pursue housing, whether that means building. Hopefully BC Housing steps up, but I'm not super confident in them. So whether that means building or acquiring, but people should have a secure, private place to call home, and that is a huge part of my plan. It's a goal of mine. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Terry McConaughey. I'll give you just the end of the question. What housing alternatives and support will you advocate for on council?
Mayor and Council needs to continue to advocate with BC Housing and other areas of the provincial and federal governments to ensure that there is a spectrum of housing, all the way from low barrier to supportive housing. I think it is the Housing First initiative that is definitely something that I will continue to advocate for, to make sure that everybody has a bed to put their head, a door to close, to keep them safe, and the opportunity to just reach outside that door and find the supports that they require if they wish.
Thank you, Terry. And the last one goes to Carm Maness. And Carm, the question again is just what housing alternatives and support will you advocate for on council?
Well, I think actually we could offer better low barrier housing than what's even offered. I mean, easily could have offered a toilet. I was there yesterday, and one of the guys I used to work with, his body is burned now, and his dad is a good friend of mine, worked with him for about 5 years. So this is absolutely real to me. They're my friends. And we could offer way better than what's offered. They're also just a staff member that could be there, and each area can set their own rules. What's going to happen is, we got to get a separate group, all of us immediately, half with the homeless and marginalized and their advocates, the other the business community. We're going to work together. It's the same goal. Okay, then, I'm still confused by they didn't use the Simon Fraser Lodge. There's lots of other buildings around. We're going to have that quadrant-style housing available. It's going to solve all the questions we talked about earlier. Like if you have a low barrier, you can smoke there with a person to help you. There's so many options. There's always many solutions to every problem.
Thank you, Carm. And thank you to all of the candidates. That concludes our third round of questioning. Jules Bedeau is going to lead a round of trivia before we go. Jules, are you behind me somewhere?
It's supposed to be fun.
Okay. You're going to the bathroom? What's that? Oh. We're going to hand some things out here for a second. Oh, yes.
Does anybody need any water? Tim, you guys need water? Do I need this? You need this.
Are you going to come up here? Or can I just do it from here? Yes, your mic works?
Check.
Are we going to take a little bathroom break? All right. We're taking a short bathroom break, so maybe it's a good opportunity to just stretch. Short stretch. And if anybody needs water, please raise your hand and we'll bring you out one. All right. Thanks.
Maybe I should go out there.
Were they hard enough?
They were good. They were good. Good job, though.
I'm really glad so many people came. Hey. Yeah.
You set the tone. Nice.
Yeah. I think that was one of the first most important thing, right? Otherwise everything falls apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
What?
Are you Julian? Nice to meet you. If they need ID.
If they don't have ID,
okay.
They can bring in a document at 2 doors down or from a window.
2 doors down. And document, okay, and just, they just have to say, I want to vote and I don't have ID, basically, okay. Okay, cool. I will, thank you. I was, yeah.
Well, I haven't been to the
You have your form? Fill it out.
I left the mic still, the mic, whatever, it's a little too like low, so it's like, oh my god, dude, this was
I know, we should have had someone up there too. Like everyone.
Yeah? Don't smoke sure now, this is the most emotional day of What's up, girl?
Who do we see together honorarium when we're done?
Is it It'll be at the end. At the end on your way out. On your way out, okay.
Yeah.
Get going? Is it cat?
You gotta hand in your form or else.
Do you have your form, Margaret? Yeah.
Have all the candidates returned?
Are you waiting for them to calm down, or?
No, we're waiting for Adam Plant to come back.
Oh, okay. Adam Hyde left. No, he went to the bathroom.
He went to the bathroom.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of stuff set aside. We have it all.
We're good.
Yeah, I gotta put another one together for next week too. Well, it seems like they're good. They're always good. Like that's the thing, right? If that's like I know guys who have they don't have like
Trivia's not tight, it's just like quick answers, right?
They're writing them down. We don't need these at all.
Okay, friendly, it's cool. Yeah, I had to do stand-up stuff. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. Julia, give me a break. My message Joel in case somebody listens. Okay. I did not plan for it.
well, in fact, like I don't know, you didn't.
Like,
It seems like you like your scope is getting bigger.
Okay, let's get started. Quiet in the audience, please. We'll be done very, very soon. Night is almost over. Are all the candidates ready? Pencils poised. Okay. The first set of questions deals with the point-in-time homeless count. This is how the demographics of unhoused people are collected. They are counted on the street, in encampments, at shelters, and drop-in centers, and in the hospital. This number underrepresents the number of unhoused people, but provides a valuable baseline estimate. The last one in Prince George was conducted in March 2021, our last data of unhoused people. How many people were experiencing homelessness in March 2021? How many people were counted in that homeless count? Estimates are fine. What percentage of those people counted
those unhoused people counted in March 2021, what percentage of them had aged out of foster care or group homes? Yeah. What percentage had been in Prince George less than a year? What percentage of unhoused people counted in March 2021 were in Prince George less than a year? Yeah. What percentage had always lived in Prince George? Moving away from the appointed time homeless count. During this campaign, some candidates have suggested that the clinic, colloquially called the Needle Exchange, should be shut down. Its actual name more accurately reflects the program's purpose, rather than enforcing a one-for-one exchange, which is a policy linked to higher rates of Hep C, HIV transmission, and abscesses. What is the real name of the Northern Health Run program that we call the Needle Exchange? Well, you're not campaigning to have a shutdown, Jen. You don't need to know it. Out of all the regional health authorities, this is question number 6, Northern Health has the highest overdose death rate. Yes, higher than Vancouver Coastal Health. Approximately how many people per 100K die of drug poisoning in Northern Health? The current stat of the overdose death rate in Northern Health, in the Northern Health region. Per 100,000. How many people have died of drug poisoning or overdose in Prince George in 2022, according to the latest coroner's report that reported drug deaths up until the end of August? Which age group, this is question number 8, which age group by decade experiences the most overdose deaths? Teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s? What is the name of the current elected chief of the Clately Tenay Band? Last question, question number 10. In November 2021, the City of Prince George applied for an injunction to evict the Moccasin Flats encampment. Their application had been previously denied, and it was denied once again because the Supreme Court, the BC Supreme Court, ruled that the city had not satisfied the Stewart condition. What is the Stewart condition? Bonus points if you can say why the city did not meet the Stewart condition. That's it. If you could all hand them back this way. Do you guys want to know the answers? Okay, we'll wait 1 minute for them to get. Well, we're going to score them and publish them publicly, so. You're running for office, man. I don't know. Well, if you want to talk about, pretend like you know what you're talking about, you should know what you're talking about. I don't know. Here you go. We're going to educate you. Okay. In March 2021, the point-in-time homeless count counted homeless people at encampments, hospitals, shelters, and on the street, 163. 163. What percentage of them had aged out of foster care or group homes? 48%. What percentage had been in Prince George less than a year? 8%. What percentage had always lived in Prince George? 26%. And 50% of people had moved from away from Prince George, moved from other places in northern BC. The actual name of the Needle Exchange? The AIDS Prevention Program. The rate of drug poisoning death in Northern Health, 52 people per 100K. The provincial rate is 42 people per 100K. How many people have died of drug overdose / poisoning in Prince George in 2022? According to the BC Coroner's report up to the end of August, 46. What age group by decade experiences the most overdose deaths? People in their 50s. Is that right? What is the name of the current elected chief of the Claytley Tenay Band? Great work. You say it louder?
What's that?
You say it louder?
Dolly Logan.
Great work. What is the Stewart condition? That the bylaw violation of the camp could only be enforced once sufficient, available, and accessible housing and daytime facilities offered the occupants of the lower protection from serious harm. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Just before everybody goes, I just want to say if anybody is needing ID, doesn't have ID to go vote, you can actually just go down to 2 doors down, and there's a document that you can pick up there in order to make sure that you can vote, even if you don't have ID. And if anybody has any questions about this process, please come on up and ask us, and we're happy to answer anything that you need answers to. And thank you to all the candidates and to the audience tonight.
I wrongly attribute you to having a conversation with me. It was not you. It was Jen. My apologies. I'm so sorry. It was another young lady. So I just want you to think that.
I was like,
I never talked to her. I knew you were going to do that. Just throw it out there. Oh my God, I'm going to clarify it. It was not a...
Help me out with 2 doors down. She's asking. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
what's the question?
So 2 doors down is actually... No, it is such... Yeah, it's Christopher Wood, Kansas High School.